Welcome to the Court of History. I'm Sidney Blumenthal. I'm here with my co-host, Sean Wilentz of Princeton University. Sean, Trump has had some trouble with his recent retribution lawsuits and his U.S. attorney in the Eastern Division of Virginia. They've been overturned. She's been ousted. And yet he hasn't stopped. He keeps going.
Well, this is Trump's MO. I mean, he only has 2 or 3 different strategies, if you call them that. And one of them is to double down. And when he defeats somebody double down, he'll triple down. And he'll get more and more aggressive. Thinking the more aggressive you are, eventually you'll succeed. Of course, this is what led to the downfall of Taj Mahal and many other enterprises on his part. The world can only hope that that's what's going on here. But in the meantime, a great deal of damage is being done, despite the fact that the lower courts, we'll see what the Supreme Court does. Lower courts have certainly been protecting the Constitution. You know, it's a long fight and it's a bitter fight.
Yeah, by the Taj Mahal, you don't mean the musician. And
no, I don't mean it. I actually know.
Building
I know
in India, the palace in India.
Donald Trump. No, not at all.
You mean, tell us what you mean.
The Taj Mahal was in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and it was a great, what should we say, his attempt to make Las Vegas come to the Jersey Shore. It's a bit like in The Godfather, actually, except that he was using the Philadelphia mob rather than the L.A. and New York mob. And it went belly up to the point where his father had to be buying up chips in order to pay back his debts. But that's another story.
Yeah. Well, Trump... They say Trump always chickens out, Taco, but Trump always fails and goes bankrupt. It just takes a long time, and he takes whole enterprises with him. Let's hope he doesn't take the entire United States.
Starting with the Democratic Party, which he's out to destroy, right? I mean, there are a number of things that are in his sights, and it's not just the people that he's out for now. He's really out to establish a one-party state. A one-man state, in effect, because that party is just him. So, there's many things going on here. I think the retribution just is the beginning of it, and we'll see how he goes with the others.
Yeah. Well, we have someone with us as a guest who is expert in these matters and has had vast experience in dealing with everything from retribution to scandal to corruption to Washington institutions, from the Congress to the State Department to the Treasury, and that is Jonathan M. Weiner. He is an international lawyer. He has also been the United States Special Envoy for Libya, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for International Law Enforcement, and he was the counsel to Senator John Kerry on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Jonathan was a key senior staffer investigating the Iran-Contra scandal. He's written and lectured widely, not so wildly, on U.S. Middle Eastern policy, counterterrorism, international money laundering, illicit networks, corruption, and U.S.-Russia issues. Welcome, Jonathan, to the Court of History. It is now adjourned. Not adjourned, it's in session.
Happy to be here.
So, Jonathan, the cases have been dismissed involving James Comey and Letitia James because Lindsay Halligan, the U.S. attorney from the Eastern District of Virginia, was ruled by the federal court to have been illegally appointed. What happens with these cases now?
Well, with the Comey case, the Justice Department can appeal as much as it wants. There's a statute which says that if a case is dismissed without prejudice, the cases were dismissed without prejudice by the district court judge, you can refile. But that's not true, actually, in a situation as in Comey's, when the statute of limitations has run. And Lindsay Halligan filed that almost immediately upon being appointed, and was appointed clearly for the purpose of filing it when others declined. And her appointment's a nullity. The prosecution is a nullity. It means legally it didn't happen. It ceases to exist. And since it ceases to exist, they didn't bring a prosecution within the time allotted by the law. So Comey, regardless of how much they fussed about it, now, there are all kinds of reasons that case never should have been brought in the first place. First of all, he didn't violate the law. It's the facts are extraordinarily weak, which is why the prosecutors would prosecute it. It's a straight case. It was a political prosecution, as Comey's lawyers alleged properly. How do you know it's a prosecution when the president says he needs to be indicted? He's a criminal. Indict him now. Why hasn't he been indicted already? Which is a paraphrase of the words he actually used. You have to go back and look at his actual words, but that's my understanding of what he said. That's a political vendetta. It's not a legal case. So before you get to the facts, before you look at the actual merits of the case, which were extraordinarily weak and improper, the case is done for that process reason. And again, I'm sure the Justice Department will appeal. They say they're going to appeal. They may try and do it again, but it's over. It's done.
Well, what about the statute of limitations involving Comey? They could refile for James, I assume, if they wanted to go through the entire process. But with Comey, they cannot, can they?
Correct. That's different between the two of them.
So Comey's done on this.
He's done absent the further retaliation, revenge, and whatever they choose to do on bogus grounds. This was already bogus, but it's now bogus, and the statute of limitations is run, which means it can't be rebrought. You can't convene a new grand jury and put the alleged facts at the supposed law in front of them and get them to indict, even if it was a ham sandwich, as opposed to a former FBI director who Trump hates.
So Trump then immediately launched a new retribution campaign, and this time against 6 Democratic members of the Congress, both in the Senate and the House, who made an ad saying that members of the armed forces and intelligence services should not follow illegal orders. All of those members who made that ad were veterans, one way or another. And Trump said that they should be punishable by death. And he keeps coming at it. And now he has thrown the FBI to try and question them. There are a lot of questions I have about that whole business. What do you think it's about, starting at the top? Why is he doing this particular retribution campaign?
Sure. What was the statement they made that so upset him? You must not follow an illegal order. That's part of the military law. You're not allowed to do it. There can be consequences if you do it along the way, but in the end, you're not allowed to do it as a matter of basic responsibility of the military. Now, the question is, what illegal orders might the president be considering, or what order that someone might consider to be illegal that he's trying to send a message ahead of? Now, who's the people he's trying to send a message to? Obviously, Democratic politicians are already against him. The Democratic Party. The article I wrote was called "Criminalizing the Opposition," and he wants to have, like the Old Testament God, the Old Testament, no other gods before him, like Lucifer in Paradise Lost. He cannot tolerate any authority other than his own, which is why he's after every element of civil society, one after another, to get them compromised, broken, indicted. So this strategy of indicting elected officials, going after them, is a strategy, and it's to weaken all opposition. But here there's an additional audience, not just the people he's going after, and not just after other people who are politicians or elected officials.
Who is he going after then?
The message here is to the military itself. If you're thinking about this question, know ahead of time. Anyone who does that is engaging in treason. That could even be. So the question then becomes, what are the orders that he's thinking about? And he's told us already in earlier statements. He's referred to domestic opposition in various ways as treasonous. as something that is in violation of our Constitution, in violation of his authority if you disagree with him. And he's been toying with the Insurrection Act for a long time, which lets him call out the military for use domestically. So where I believe this is heading, and the arguably illegal orders that he's concerned the military might not follow, is using the military against the United States. I can't think of what else would.
So I have a further question about the FBI being asked to interrogate sitting members of Congress for something that, while Trump claims it is a capital offense, is actually no offense at all, because all they've done is say that members of the military should obey the military code of.
I mean, it's almost like a public service announcement. I mean, it's just saying what is obvious and telling the troops what is the case, just in case you didn't know.
Yeah. So
Jonathan, here's my question.
Please.
Given that you've served in the Congress as a senior staffer to a senator and have had a lot of experience with it, what should the senators and members of Congress do in terms of being interviewed by the FBI? Should they do this voluntarily? What should they do about it? And what does it mean?
Well, first, the Constitution grants legislative immunity to everybody in the Congress precisely because they don't want members of Congress to be gone after by people in the general public or by the executive branch, by anybody, for legislators. That's built right into the structure of the Constitution. It's been there a long time. And when I was a congressional staffer doing investigations around Contra BCCI, from time to time, people would subpoena me, serve me, demand that I provide my notes, different element of my work to them for their own purposes. I'd call up the Senate legal counsel and say, got another one, and he'd politely tell them to go pound sand, because my work was constitutionally protected as a staffer, not as a senator or congressman. So they're protected from this, and they have absolutely no obligation to respond to the FBI whatsoever on it. It's exceeding the FBI's authority. It's literally unconstitutional.
Yeah, so it's actually in the Constitution, and any of our viewers can look it up. Article 1, Section 6, Clause 1, it's called the Speech or Debate Clause, and it grants members of Congress immunity from arrest and legal questioning for their actions and statements during legislative sessions and activities. And that's what this was.
Yeah, the only way the FBI could ask anything of a member of Congress would be in a situation like Robert Menendez was in. Go into somebody's house and find gold bars. And the gold bars in the gym bag is not something that relates to privileged debate of the Congress. And even you have to be careful as to how you get your evidence, whatever you get, because questioning someone for their legislative activity is simply unconstitutional. And what makes it particularly poignant and ironic and powerful in this situation is that, of course, the Roberts Court in the summer of 2024 found the president had this kind of immunity, even though the founding fathers, in writing the Constitution, gave that immunity solely to the Congress, suggesting they thought about it and decided the Congress needed it, and the president shouldn't have it. Now, Justice Roberts and other members of his court found otherwise, and here we are. But the language of the Constitution itself is very clear on both sides.
Yeah. This is also an attack on people who are veterans for their speech, and maybe an attempt to chill all veterans, suggesting to them that they could be subjected to attacks as a result of their criticisms.
Well, under the Trump administration, and in the eyes of Donald Trump, we know that the media doesn't have free speech rights, because if you edit something in a way he doesn't like, he can sue you. and demand millions upon millions of dollars and potentially get it through what some might characterize as extortion. He doesn't have free speech rights. Universities don't, because if the universities are operating a free speech environment, he can take away their funding. He can threaten them until they put people in place to his liking. He can force presidents to be fired. He can force faculty to be kicked out. He can get a school like Columbia University to agree to a hall proctor for essentially all of its activities. It's quite, and he's done this again systematically to eliminate anything that would not be under his power, authority, and control as a strategy.
Well, this goes straight to your article that appears in the Washington Spectator called Criminalizing the Opposition. And the subtitle is even more frightening, which is how the Trump administration is preparing for the 2026 elections. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what Trump's strategy is for the 2026 election and how he is using all of these means to try and weaponize election machinery to prevent the Democrats from winning the midterms next year?
I'm going to start first with a quick reference to Venezuela, where he's going after Venezuela on the ground that the government is the lead of a terrorist group, a narco-terrorist group, which is essentially a slogan or a label, not an organization or a group.
And let me just say that, interject here, Jonathan, before you go on, for our viewers, that you are one of the world's leading experts in international crime, and that you were the Assistant Secretary of State in charge of dealing with this. So please go on now.
Yeah, right after 9/11, I was asked to testify before Congress on what we needed to do to prevent another 9/11 in the area of financial crime. And we'll talk about that a little later, but it's relevant. The point is there is no such group with the label that Trump has put on the Venezuelan government as being the leader of it. Similarly, he's issued a domestic executive order which describes Antifa as a group who are opposed to Christian nationalism and a variety of other things that he likes. And of course, Antifa is a label, again, it's not an organization, and it means anti-fascist. And there are different groups in the world that identify with Antifa or people, but it's not an organization. It's not a group, and we don't have a domestic terrorism law. If you're a terrorist, as it were, you might be carrying out insurrection, attacking the U.S. Capitol, for instance. A domestic terrorist might do that. But they wouldn't be indicted as domestic terrorists for that. They could be indicted as insurrectionists. They could be indicted for assault and battery. They could be indicted for interfering with a federal proceeding. There are a variety of things that if you did that, you could be indicted for, but not domestic terrorism because there is no such statute. And he's created an executive order to define it that way. And the reason he's doing that is essentially for the purpose of putting all of the different opponents up into a ball and saying, that's another example of what I have directed the United States government to organize against to defend the country. So he's essentially defining his opposition as terrorists or criminals or heads of criminal organizations as part of saying that anyone who defies me and what I want to happen is an enemy of me and an enemy of the state, and therefore may be prosecuted. Thus Comey, thus Letitia James, thus
and so on.
And so on.
Yeah. But there's so many other ways that they're trying to cripple the Democratic Party in particular. I mean, it looks as if they're trying to, as I said before, make a one-party state. And in your piece, you actually talk about the ways in which the government is not just going after, the Trump administration rather, is not just going after particular individuals, but going after the infrastructure of politics and attacking that head on as well.
Act Blue and George Soros have one thing in common. They're both funding political activity. In one case as a platform, in another case as a large donor that is anti-Trump. And so he put literally initiated action against Act Blue and put George Soros into his pantheon of people who need to be gone after. So he said very precisely, go after this person, go after that person, because he doesn't like their political activity. And he's been able to take the Department of Justice and the FBI under his new appointees, and use that to target those he opposes and to protect those he supports. So the organization of the Justice Department, our justice system, from the highest levels on down, being undertaken in a systematic way, which means it's no longer justice, it's retribution. And it's a political justice system in which men, not laws, govern. So he's essentially going directly after rule of law. And the biggest barrier he has right now is not civil society, which has been cowed to a remarkable extent, but district court judges, federal judges, who apply the law to the facts and say, this is nuts. This case is going down, that case is going down, this other case is going down. That's happening to him a lot because it's such a challenge to a law-based system, even though it's imperfect and always has been.
Yeah, Trump has invoked repeatedly using the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO, to use against political opposition. Tell us about how that weaponization of RICO against organizations.
Yeah, RICO is a fascinating statute with a fascinating history. It was created by Cornell law professor Robert Blakely, I think his name was.
Right, he was a senior congressional staffer at one point.
Yeah, and he created it in order to be able to go after organized crime in a traditional sense. And the idea was that the leaders had been too protected and were getting away because the people below them would not, code of omerta, would not point upward to the leader. But in case you could attribute 2 or more acts that violated federal law, basically any federal felony, to the leader of an organization, thus take the entire organization down, separate them from any profits they made from any of their crimes, impose treble damages on them for any actual economic damage they caused if he did it in a civil action, because there's civil RICO as well as criminal RICO. And he created an incredibly powerful tool to go after people who are systemic. States then, and I drafted a RICO law for Massachusetts way back in the early 80s. The state RICO laws allowed the same thing at the state level under state law to provide that tool. So you had it for a criminal tool for prosecutors to use and a civil tool where victims of a racketeering, influence, and corrupt organization could go after the perps. And if a jury so determined, get up to triple damages. Very powerful. Well, he's essentially flipping RICO on its head to use it to target enemies on the basis of spurious non-crimes. But that's so if you treat every act of rebellion, every act of political disagreement as a potential crime, it's fraud. It's rigged. So the 2 of the terms that he likes to use in connection with elections. You can say that the get out the vote activity of the Democrats to mobilize people against him involve illicit bribes, illicit gifts, violated this or that element of some statute somewhere. You may have a weak case, you may have a non-existent case, but you articulate it, you use that, and boom, your opponent is in a massive amount of trouble until such time as a judge throws it out. Remember, facts, when you indict on the basis of certain facts or file a lawsuit, a civil lawsuit, which justice can also do on the basis of those facts, you do those things. Initially, those facts are deemed to be sufficient to get you to the next phase of a trial. And it's a very low standard if you can get a grand jury to indict. And the ham sandwich standard was demonstrated in the Comey and James cases.
Mm-hmm. But it strikes me in some ways. Go ahead, Sid.
Go ahead, Sean.
Well, it strikes me that in many ways, the Trump outfit, maybe even the entire Republican Party, insofar as it exists anymore, as you said, is flipping it. They're flipping this around, right? What's to stop, say, states' attorney generals from putting it back on its head? In other words, the people who are accusing their oppositions of RICO violations are in fact doing RICO violations themselves.
I think there's a very good argument for that under state law. And,
exactly.
Under state law. But you would have to find actual acts of fraud, actual acts of fraud, violence, embezzlement, extortion. Now, you could argue, possibly, that some of the things that have already been done in the Trump administration amount to extortion. The question is, if the president has authorized the extortion, who else was involved in the extortive activity? And
precisely.
Are they immune or not under state law? And even if you couldn't, under state law, necessarily indict the president at this time, given the Supreme Court doctrine and the uncertain borders of it, you could potentially indict others who don't have the same immunity he has under state RICO laws, if you can find the violations of state law that are encompassed within the state RICO laws. And they're a little different. Some of them are all felonies. Some of them are only enumerated violations based on what organized crime traditionally was doing. The one that seems to me the most powerful over the 2025 is extortion, because we've seen extortion again and again and again. Abuse of federal authority for the purpose of forcing someone to make a payment to call it off. And those cases have not done well in federal court when they've been defended, but some people couldn't take the pressure and caved in instead of bringing the court action.
Ultimately, we're talking about an election a year from now, a midterm election for the Congress. And if the Congress were to flip, enormous power would switch to the Democrats, and they would have a lot of instruments on their behalf. Right now, the Democrats are basically powerless in the Congress. And the question is getting there, getting to that point. And that's what Trump is thinking about, how to prevent that. Isn't that right? And what would happen in a final scenario if the Democrats were to win the Congress in a free and fair election in the midterms, and Trump would still claim it was rigged? What would he do, and what might happen?
Well, there I think about my work in Libya, which over the entire time I was special envoy, always had two governments, each claiming the other was illegitimate. One recognized by the United States and most countries, the other only recognized by a couple, but maintaining its authority internally in areas it controlled. So if one were to cynically advise Mr. Trump what he might do, and if he were to cynically choose to ignore election results, assuming this under state law, the Supreme Courts, the state level all say valid elections, everybody's forced to sign and certify, even if ICE and the FBI and the military have been stationed a mile away from the polls, but surrounding them to impede progress. Enough people get to the polls anyway. Even if early voting has been changed as a result of an action by Congress in 2026 to stop it, even if mail-in voting has been forbidden by the same action of the Congress to stop it, changing the rules. Pretend, regardless of all of that, and he may do all of that, the Democrats have still won district by district by district. President Trump says, well, the people who won in Texas, the people who won in California, people who won in those districts in New York, fraud, rigged elections. I will not recognize them, and I instruct Mike Johnson and all those who are still in office, which is everybody who ran. They all won. All my people won. To caucus anyway, and declare themselves a majority. I will not recognize those actors who rigged the elections. I don't care what they say. I will not deal with them because those elections were rigged. And he does that. And under the Constitution says each house shall determine its own membership. So we could wind up in a situation where the Supreme Court does Pontius Pilate. Oh no, we're not going to determine this. This is up to the House and the Senate. We recognize that there is no House now because we're having a fight as to who's the legitimate House, but we're not going to determine that.
So Mike Johnson becomes Mike Pence, as Trump wished Mike Pence to act, not to certify the elections, and tries to block them.
Yeah, and so you have two competing majorities one of which has been the majority chosen by the voters, and the other which is the majority recognized by Mr. Trump, both saying they're legitimate House of Representatives. Now, absent all other factors, let's pretend that this is all hermetically sealed, and we don't have 300 million plus American people or anything else functioning. No media functioning, no courts functioning, no universities functioning, nobody out on the street, and no markets functioning. And we get back to that point. Well, in that situation, Mr. Trump could say, if there's fighting over who's legitimate Congress, I don't need any of them. I'll just govern by myself, which is more or less what he's doing this year anyway, right? So he just says, we'll just keep going that way. And if I need to borrow money, I'll work with my Fed appointees, and we'll find a way around all this stuff, which is handicapping and weakening America and causing our enemies to laugh at us and not allowing us to fulfill our destiny for greatness. So he does that. Now, the problem with that hermetically sealed imagined future is it ignores the activities of 300 million Americans.
More than, yes.
More than that. It ignores, some of them are under the age of 18, but never mind. Not everybody is politically engaged, but it ignores a massive number of people. It ignores state governors. It ignores state's attorney general. It ignores state secretaries of state. It ignores the state judiciary. It ignores whatever is left of the media and all the ways people communicate. And it ignores financial markets. Now, what is going to happen to everybody's nest egg, such as they are, and to the whole function of the United States as a country, if markets go into free fall? And are markets going to be steady in a situation in which the president has declared, l'état c'est moi, le cosmos c'est moi, le multiverse c'est moi? I think you're at that point, you've got a test of the entire country as to what happens next. And every single color revolution that's happened anywhere in the world has happened in connection with a contested election in which the leadership in place at the time has refused to accept the outcome of a full and free election. And that's the moment when you sometimes have mass uprisings because a leader's gone one step too far and the people will not accept it. That doesn't always happen. In Venezuela, pretty clearly, Maduro lost and lost hugely, but his security forces were able to keep people in check despite the democratic desire for change in that country. What happens here? That's why he went after those vets. He went after those vets today, those senators who were vets, because he wanted to send a message to the military, even if it's an illegal act, an illegal order. If I've ordered it, you have to honor it, and no other authority will be tolerated. That's what I believe is my opinion about his activating the Justice Department against these legislators on this topic.
Well, we've gone from the events of retribution of today all the way to a year from now into a nightmare scenario. And it would take an overwhelming election to make clear that would be illegitimate and an attempt to overthrow the Constitution. So with that, we will end part one with Jonathan Weiner. Stay tuned for part two. We're going to discuss a deeper question of corruption involving the Trump administration. So for now, on behalf of my co-host, Sean Wilentz, please subscribe to Legal AF. And the Court of History, indeed, now is adjourned.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.